I remember someone saying to me once that the essence of being a great leader is just being able to have conversations, which I thought was like, is that it? Is that all we've got to do? So I think spending time with people, spending time listening, being ultra clear as a leader about what you want to achieve, so really clear on what the purpose is in an organization, getting people the resources they need and the space they need to really thrive. And then I think there's a great thing for leaders in just getting out their way and letting them do amazing work and trusting them.
Hi, and welcome back to Care Beyond Profits. I'm Azura Ali. In this episode, I'm joined by James McCulloch. James is the Chief Executive of Manaaki Tāngata Victim Support. James grew up across Australia, UK, and the Wales, and he started his career as a gardener. He then went on to become the Director of Parks at the City of London at just 27 years old. And he was only one of 6 people to hold that role since the 1880s. In this episode, we talk about how he found purpose through trial and error and how making head and heart decisions can come up in your work. He also talks about well-being, trust, and honest conversations that define his leadership today. If this episode speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. I appreciate you. Let's get into it. James, welcome to Care Beyond Profits. It's such a privilege to have you here.
Oh, kia ora, Azora. It's really good to see you again. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, James. Hey, before we dive in, I want to go back all the way back to your origins. So for the audience listening today, where did you grow up and what kind of environment shaped you?
Oh, what a great question to start. A lot of different components to this. I was born in Australia. I was born in Melbourne because my parents were 10-pound POMs. So they were working out there for a couple of years. We then moved back to the UK and lived all sorts of places all over the UK. But I guess I spent most of my time growing up in North Wales. So living in a small market town there. And that's where I went to school. And I have most of my childhood memories from there. So that's probably, I don't know, I think we're always still growing up, but that's probably where I did most of my growing up in the traditional sense.
Lovely. And from there, how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I think life takes really interesting twists and turns, doesn't it? And it kind of makes sense when you trace it back. But from school, I had an amazing summer job as a gardener, which I loved. Summer jobs are the best because you get to do all sorts of fun things. And I was all set to go and do accountancy at university. But I remember thinking, I wish that I could have a job that was as much fun as my summer job. And I did a bit of research and spoke to careers people. And actually, you can do qualifications in gardening and horticulture and landscape management. So I did that. And from there, I got a job as a parks manager, I suppose like a parks and reserves manager. And from there, I ended up eventually being the director of parks at City of London and then a CEO of a parks trust. And I guess I suddenly realized I was then a CEO of non-profits, of for-purpose organizations. So there is a kind of logical step through it from being a landscape designer to managing Manaaki Tāngata Victim Support. But you have to kind of join all the dots.
Absolutely. And for our listeners joining in from landscape to now what you do today, can you just elaborate a little bit more about what exactly is it that you do and what is your purpose behind your work?
Yeah, thank you. So Manaaki Tāngata Victim Support has been around for 38 years. So we were proudly founded in Gisborne by a police officer who noticed that there's a lot of focus put around the offender or alleged offender when a crime happens, but not so much focus put around the victim. So he wanted to change that. And so he grabbed together a few people that were keen to help. And they started that evening by contacting victims and making sure that they had the emotional support and the practical support and information they needed. And then it grew and it grew and it grew across the country and became this amazing groundswell of community organizations. And fast forward to today, we have about 200 staff in 65 offices from the far north of New Zealand down to Stewart Island. 24/7, making sure that victims of crime are supported. So that's practical assistance, that's emotional support, that's referrals to other organizations, and that's helping to navigate people through a a situation which is awful, obviously, but also involves all sorts of strange words or concepts or processes that they won't have any experience of. So our amazing support workers work right throughout the country and remotely to make sure that, when that unimaginably bad thing happens to you or your family, you're never alone in that moment or in the hours and months afterwards as well. So it's amazing work. We are a really integral part of the criminal justice system here in New Zealand as well.
That's very powerful, James. And to lead an organisation that does so much, there's a lot that goes behind the person in the leadership role. So I want to dive into that a little bit. And starting with your values, I want you to talk to us about, if you could only pick 3 values, what 3 would you pick and why?
Yeah, I guess they continue to get shaped throughout your life. Family, whānau, is always very important to me. It was from those days growing up in North Wales, and I suppose the sense of support that comes from that, but also the sense of encouragement to go off and have adventures. I've ended up living on the other side of the world. So there's something about the connection of and support of family, which is very important. And now that's my own family, because we have two boys, grown-up boys now. Purpose is incredibly important to me as well. So I suppose I've done a lot of different jobs in a lot of different places all over the world, including throughout Southeast Asia as well. I've always been lucky to do jobs that I've loved, but I've always been lucky enough to do jobs that have real meaning. And, you can sort of trace the steps very quickly and think even on the worst day, you would have made a difference for somebody or some community. So purpose is important. And I think the third one is a really simple one, which is around happiness, which is around well-being, fulfillment and contentment. And, often we ask ourselves, when were you most happiest? And people trace back a time from 10 years ago. I'd always like to say right now. If someone asked me when were you happiest, I'd say now, today. Because if it was sometime in the past, that sort of indicates that things are getting worse. So sense of happiness or well-being, strong sense of purpose in what I do. I love what I do, but balancing that with the fact that it is only work as well. So family, friends, connection outside of work is an important part of my values as well.
I love how you delved into the change in the values as you go through your life. One of the things I'm really curious about is you've obviously chosen the role that you do and what you do right now, but how did you actually find your own purpose?
I think you find it through trial and error, in my view. You find it sometimes through doing the things that don't give you that sense of alignment and energy as well. So, I've had jobs or voluntary opportunities that I haven't found those alignments with. And what I've realized is that really, really erodes every other sense of purpose and happiness you have in your life. It's very easy to tell yourself it's only a job. It's only what I do in the week. I can forget about it at weekends. But if I think about times when I wasn't feeling that alignment, it would affect my health, my happiness in all areas of my life. So I found it by experimenting and realizing what it's like not to have those things as well. I think we all put a lot of time and energy into trying to get that balance right. We're never getting it completely right, are we? We're just experimenting. So I know the times in my life where I haven't got the balance with family or friends or well-being or health right, and how that feels for me as well. So I've sort of, through trial and error, you sort of hit on the perfect formula, or as close as possible to it. And I'm still working on it.
Absolutely. Was there a time in your life that you realized that this was the path you wanted to take?
Yeah, I guess it was that time when I transitioned from managing parks and reserves for local government in London primarily, which was kind of exciting, and it's purposeful because everyone at some point in their life has walked through a park or a reserve or taken their children or grandchildren to a play area or remember playing on them as kids themselves. So I think that's pretty understandable. And then I found myself being CEO of a trust that managed parks and reserves sort of in a city quite far north of London. And I had this moment where I got sent on this program for new CEOs of nonprofits or for purposes. And I thought, well, I feel like a bit of a fraud here. I'm just a parks guy, and realizing actually I wasn't anymore. I was now, managing an organization that just happened to do that as its product. I was now a CEO. And this opened up this kind of world of the for-purpose nonprofit organizations I didn't really know about. And you meet these amazing people. I think people have come into the for-purpose world for lots of different reasons. Some people have left other jobs, other sectors. And I thought it was just really cool that, we were doing something really meaningful, really enjoyable, really satisfying. And I guess as the world has got what it seems to have got more challenging and difficult, particularly in recent times, doing something that in some small way makes a difference is pretty satisfying. I think it feels even more important.
It's really nice how you've summarized that in terms of the shifts that the world is going through right now in your life. Was there someone who really trusted you along the way, and who was that person, and how did they support you while you were navigating this?
I think there are times in your career where you're given like these amazing opportunities that you feel completely unqualified for, completely out of your depth for. So I think about early people in my career that trusted me to do a role that seemed far outside of what I was qualified for or experienced for. So I think I can think of 2 or 3 managers that took a chance on me. I can think of the person that gave me my first big break. So at 27, I became, the superintendent, the director of parks and reserves for the City of London. I was taking over from someone who was twice my age, who pretty much retired. I was only the 6th person to do that since 1880 or something. It was like a major role. And I think it was the chair of that board that saw something in me and gave me an opportunity. I had no idea what I was doing for the first few weeks and months. We're still making things up as we go along in our roles now, aren't we? But I just saw, that thing he saw in me, I suppose. And I've tried to do that for other people. I tried to, in recruitment that we've made here at Victim Support or in other roles, you see something in someone, you want to give them that opportunity, that break early in their lives to do that. Yeah. And it's never comfortable because we're slightly outside of our comfort zone. But I think when you feel encouraged by someone, you can give it a go.
That's incredible. And starting so young, I can totally relate to that myself. Having in every role that I've been on, I've ended up being the youngest person to hold that position. And I think often it also means that you have your own support network around you. So in your terms, what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm blessed to have an amazing family, lovely, supportive wife, amazing parents that have kind of encouraged me, but also looked out for me throughout my life. So my wife, Catherine, has been just an amazing support throughout that, because I think in those early days as well, you're moving around for jobs. You're seeing opportunities, which means moving and uprooting yourself from a community and going somewhere else. So you can't do that in isolation. You need that support around you. You need someone to listen to you, someone to keep you grounded as well, which she does really well now, along with my 2 boys. All the amazing conversations that we have at Victim Support, some of the opportunities we get to speak to people. It's nice to have a family that keep you quite grounded and make fun of you as well. So I think that's probably what I need. But I agree. I think for all of us who've had that really challenging, lucky break, whatever you want to call it, early in our careers, there's a lot of feelings. Imposter syndrome is well spoken about and understood, but I think it's the feelings of anxiety and nervousness that you feel before every meeting or every major event. And I guess I've just kind of learned to lean into that and take a breath and just use those nerves positively as best as I can.
I love that. In your time, have you found that there's been a couple of practical things that you did for yourself that really helped in that process?
I think I know what helps, and I if I spend much more time exercising, if I spend time cycling to work, if I spend time getting away from the desk and getting outside, I know that's really good for me. If I focus on not eating or drinking the wrong things, I'm better. And I also know that, we're only human, so we also do the opposite of that quite a lot as well. And so I know how that feels. But generally, exercise, trying to separate from work, and sleep. I've learned so much more recently how sleep is like a superpower for all of us. And if we have that, we can tackle the world in different ways. So trying to find ways to switch off from work, which I think for us in the for-purpose sector, by the way, is really, really hard, because we do jobs that we love. We always want to do a bit more because everyone needs a bit more. And, it's kind of a vocation, right? So I think finding ways, even when you love your role, to try and switch off and immerse yourselves in different things. So different hobbies, very important.
James, tell me, was there a decision throughout your career that you felt that you were taking a bit of a risk? And then how did you handle that? Because we talked about purpose, we talked about your values. And often when our values are challenged, we feel like when we're put in a place of risk, it's quite a lot for us to navigate. So would you be able to tell us and the audience how you navigated that?
Yeah, I can think of a lot of examples. I think if we're leaders that are really serious about full purpose and really maximizing the outcome for beneficiaries, which we all are in this sector, there are really tough decisions along the way, because if you stay focused on the beneficiary, in our case, the victim of crime, that means making decisions that may seem out of alignment with what people thought a for-purpose organization would be like. I remember experiencing this almost in every role I've been in the for-purpose world, this kind of view that, non-profit maybe means slightly amateur, or that we don't tackle tough issues in terms of staff performance, or that we're not really focused on outcomes and purpose. We just kind of do everything for everyone. We've had to go through a real shift here at Victim Support in being focused on purpose. If we know that our purpose is to support victims of crime and traumatic events, that therefore means that we shouldn't be spending time. We haven't got the time to focus on other things. And so we need to make sure that we're absolutely laser focused on that. It's very recent, actually. It's only in the last few weeks. One of the decisions that we made earlier in the year was to finally become a staff-based organization. So to transition away from having used volunteers. And I would describe that as one of those real head and heart moments as a leader. In your head, it's absolutely right. It's the right thing for our organization, for the victims that we support. It's the right thing for our staff. All of the research, all of the data points to that, but there's still this real big heart pull, which means that you're going to have to say goodbye to people who've supported you and been by your side. And they maybe won't understand, because they're actually feeling something completely different as well in terms of being a volunteer and being aligned to your purpose. So I think that was one that really challenged us in the last few months, to actually go around the country and sit down with our volunteers, thank them, acknowledge them, farewell them, even though they were upset, some of them were angry. The vast majority understood, I would say, but that's one of those moments that as a leader, you have to stay absolutely focused on what you know to be right, because, hearing criticism is hard at any point in your life. So I think that comes back to having a really, really great team around you and finding ways to switch off from that criticism as well. So those moments are really, really tough. I can think of every time you have to do a restructure, I can think of many, roles, particularly back in the UK. Those are really tough moments. You're trying to make the best of the limited resources that you've got, right, for the for-purpose organization. And that sometimes means doing things in a different way, having different team members, having less staff, different teams in different parts of the country. Those moments are really, really hard. But, I've had great coaches over the years who've really reminded me of staying absolutely focused on the purpose and on who you're trying to support. And that's a tough one, because actually that means that you have to sometimes make some hard decisions for the people around you. That never gets easier. It never ever gets any easier, but it's just something we just have to do sometimes.
James, you lead an organization, but before this, you used to be all in different countries, and we talked a little bit about how you traveled. Many countries, many experiences. I want to delve into that, because I think that's so powerful to talk about the different ethnic groups that you've worked with, and also diversity, because we see a lot of that here in New Zealand, and we're very lucky for that. So I want to start with after UK, where you went and how were those leadership roles? Tell us a little bit more about that and your experience.
Thank you. Look, I think some of this comes back to what I was saying before as well, is that you get these kind of moments where someone believes in you. And I think the other advice that I got a long time ago from a coach was just say yes. If there's an opportunity, put your hand up, because chances are most of the people won't want to do it, or they'll be slow to do that. So, when I was back in the UK, I had the opportunity to be part of the kind of peak body for parks and reserves across Europe, and got to speak at a couple of conferences. And then there was an opportunity to be on the kind of board of that organization, because no one else wanted to do it. So suddenly I found myself doing that more. And then I found myself being the European chair of that particular organization and traveling around doing all sorts of things. And I guess that taught me that doing things in different countries was a real challenge, but something I could do and sort of rise to that challenge. And then when we came to New Zealand, the first role I had, which was a very short role, a transitional role, was for a mental health charity not far from Wellington, which was just winding down and needed help sort of organizing that. So I did that for a few months, and then I went to an organization called Inspire. We were still around and very successful. So learning and development company based in New Zealand, but also Australia and now throughout Southeast Asia as well. And I had a great time at Inspire for a few years, and sort of was coming to the end of kind of the period of feeling challenged enough. And I think you do need to feel challenged in the role. And an opportunity came up to look into opening the office in Southeast Asia. And Singapore was always where they had in mind. But I'd done a fair bit of work in Malaysia before in KL and within parks and forestry. And I sort of thought that was a really interesting place to go. It was kind of less obvious as well, because lots of people focus on Singapore when they want to branch out from Australia or New Zealand. So I spent a lot of time there over a couple of years, probably going at least once a month, establishing the brand, establishing connections there, starting to win work, starting to speak a lot of events. And what I learned out in that part of the world was that speaking was everything, speaking at events, being present, being at breakfast meetings, being at dinner. Food is the great connection in the Malaysian culture anyway. And so those made for some very long days. And then I also realized what I learned was that posting about that sort of relentlessly on LinkedIn and social media was really big in that culture as well. So we sort of grew this thing and eventually established a team up there. And I'm very proud of the fact that they still have a team up there, a fantastic CEO leading that team now in that region. Look, I had the opportunity through that to go and work in all sorts of different countries across the region. And I remember that feeling of definitely feeling outside of your comfort zone from a language, from a culture point of view, maybe from feeling maybe not as safe in some places as well, a little bit challenged in great, big, busy, challenging places. I think the last place that I worked before COVID lockdown was Dhaka in Bangladesh. And I just thought that's so different to Wellington, right? It's just so busy and full on. And there's all sorts of funny things that happen to you because you do stand out. I do stand out there. And so people will ask for photos or ask to speak to you and practice English and stuff like that. So I had some really fun times doing that as well. And I guess what I learned as well is the power of listening and the power of observation as a leader is 10 times more important in a strange environment. You are listening to the kind of culture and the rhythms of your team. Obviously, in our Malaysian team, a predominantly Muslim team, pausing for prayer throughout the day, so building that into our planning and building that into kind of how we kind of ran our day as a team, at the rhythm of our day and the rhythm of our week as well. Food was a great connector. There was always a day to celebrate or some particular event to celebrate within our team. And just taking the time to notice and listen what's going on around you, I think is the most important thing. And I still think that's true wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing as a leader. Just reading the terrain, reading what's going on around you. You pick up such clues and cues around you. But I loved my time in the region. I would happily go back at some point. I think it's a really exciting place to be working. And yeah, we were just made to feel so welcome. So it was a really challenging part of my life because travel takes you away from home and away from family and long days and jet lag and all the things that go with it. But I think I would encourage anyone who has the opportunity to try and do some work offshore out of New Zealand. It's a really, really big growth opportunity and experience.
How did you find it coming back to New Zealand and getting back on your feet here? Because again, that would have been another reset to your lifestyle.
Yeah, it was weird because I was working for a New Zealand company, and so based here, we never moved, but spending a lot of time traveling back and forth to the region. So I'd have this kind of weird experience of being immersed in a situation like Mumbai or Dakar or Kuala Lumpur or wherever, and then coming back to New Zealand quite regularly, where Wellington in particular is incredibly quiet, right? I think most places in New Zealand are. And so it was a weird kind of opposite world that I was having. The other really, really hard part of that was during the pandemic as well. So I'm managing that team up in Malaysia and the region during COVID times, but working here for a New Zealand-based company. And of course, the experiences of COVID were very different all around the world. I think our experience here in New Zealand was very different, say, to Malaysia. So that was a really, really interesting challenge as a leader to try and manage the culture and well-being of a team remotely, and also to kind of keep the team here in New Zealand updated when life had got back to normal here. But life was very slow business-wise, and in terms of learning and development and actual client engagement, it was completely different in Malaysia. So that was tough. I think that was probably one of the toughest periods in that particular role, was being away from your team for a couple of years, knowing that they were having a tough time. But I don't know, I think we kind of brush that away now, don't we? We don't want to talk about those particular 2 or 3 years because they were quite painful for a lot of people. But it did teach us quite a lot. Amazing things are possible as well through the like this as well.
Absolutely. And I think talking about teams that are offshore, there's a lot of trust building there, isn't it? Because that's effectively, as a leader, you've got to build that trust. I want to dive into that a little bit more, because that really talks to a little bit of the mindset. In terms of your own leadership journey, how have you tried, and what are some of the practical skills that you've used that help in those situations to build the trust?
I remember someone saying to me once that the essence of being a great leader is just being able to have conversations, which I thought was like, is that it? Is that it? Is that all we've got to do? But then if you listen to a lot of people, why they get frustrated with their leaders, they never have conversation, or they never have tough conversations. So I think, spending time with people, spending time listening, being ultra clear as a leader about what you want to achieve. So really clear on what the purpose is in an organization, and then getting people the resources they need and the space they need to really thrive. And then I think there's a great thing for leaders in just getting out their way and letting them do amazing work and trusting them. My experience is that, generally most people want to do good work. They want to do good things, and they want to go home feeling satisfied. There's a very, very small percentage of people who don't, and you sort of come across those. But people don't want unnecessary drama in their lives, generally, I find, because life's busy enough as it is with all sorts of other things. So the trust is quite important, and putting sort of safety around that to let people thrive in those environments. And I think being quite quick to deal with it when that's not the case as well. People really notice when someone in a team or a particular team doesn't share that value, and I as leaders to deal with that in that situation. And that's hard. That's really, really hard. But I think some of the best results I've ever seen, particularly in this sector, is when you have a clear purpose, you have an amazing team, you get out their way, you focus relentlessly on well-being and support for them, and they just do amazing work because they feel safe, they feel looked after, and the purpose is so strong, right? So they want to do an amazing job. So, I think I'm probably learning as I go that the more we focus on well-being with our teams as leaders, miraculously, the better the outcomes are for everyone.
And well-being is such a critical part of the workforce at the moment. I think there's a lot of discussions happening out there about well-being. In terms of what you yourself are doing, let's start with that and then move on to the team. So I want to know from yourself, what do you do to keep yourself motivated from a well-being perspective? Is there anything that you stick to on a daily basis?
Well, I try to cycle to work each day. We live about 30 kilometers from the office here in Wellington, so that's some days a real pleasure. to do that right, and some days it's horrible. But I think that's part of the experience of these kind of well-being practices. They're not always fun. So that's an important part of my daily ritual. And so when I travel, as I do quite a bit, it's trying to replicate that by walking or running badly sometimes, but mostly walking to try and get fresh air and to try and build that into the day. I walk a fair bit, in my spare time, but I also try and find every excuse to walk between meetings in our working day. And I think, we can all do that. We can all look at little ways to try and inject some sort of moment of well-being boost or fresh air into the working day. It's just being a little bit imaginative about that as well. I try and do a couple of hobbies. So we do rowing, which is I'm bad at, which is great, right? So what I've been learning is that having a hobby that you're really bad at is really absorbing, because you're constantly striving to try and get a bit better as well. And time with family and time with friends as well. It's and never saying no to those opportunities as well. But fresh air, exercise, we've changed a lot of our one-to-ones, our catch-ups here at Victim Support to be outside, to walk around the park and to sit outside, because it's just that change of setting. We're getting exactly the same conversation, but I think there's a richness to it by being outside together. And if you look at the wider team here, I think the story is well known, but when I joined Victim Support just over 3 years ago, I don't think we were great at looking after ourselves or our people. We were amazing at looking after victims of crime. So we've had to focus so much on well-being, not just clinical supervision. Of course, you'd expect that for our frontline, but making sure that we've got a menu of different well-being options for people to pick on, and also just being ultra flexible about our working day, not just for, flexible working or working from home and all those sort of things. But I want us to be a place where life events are just easily accommodated. We've all got things happening in our lives. Children we're looking after, elderly relatives we're looking after, our own health, pets, all the different sort of ups and downs of everyday life. And I remember thinking when I arrived here, those life events seem to be taking our people over the edge. And I want us to be a place that just expects there to be life events, and life events just fit around work, and work fits around them, and it just happens. So we're not quite there yet, but I'm really proud of how far we've come. And part of that as leaders, not just us as CE, but our leadership team, is by modeling that by example as well. People seeing us, trying to have that balance in our lives as well. I just believe so strongly that we can make or break someone's day at work by the way that we respond as a leader when someone opens up to us and says, I've got this thing happening at home. Our response in that moment shapes, how they're going to deal with that at home, but also shapes their whole experience of work. And I think we can just do that so well. And what I've learned is the better we do that, here's the weird thing, the more productive people are as well, because they just focus on that rather than worrying about everything else as well. So we're really proud of how far we've come, but we want to go even further here as well.
I think if more organisations were to do that, definitely there'll be a lot more satisfaction at workplaces.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I agree. It's not always easy. There's a lot of resistance to these things some places as well. I think we believe in taking a risk sometimes as well, and also kind of shamelessly looking around the world for what other organizations are doing. We have a lot of connections with our colleagues at victim support organizations elsewhere globally. If there are things that we see that are working there that would work here and in Aotearoa New Zealand, we will take them and use them here as well. And I think some things work, some things don't, and be very open with that with your team. And that's absolutely fine.
Thank you for sharing that. James, I want to go into a little bit more about what you're doing in your workspace in terms of some of the challenges and what you're seeing. And hopefully this will inspire some other nonprofits as well. So in terms of your current challenges, what does that look like for you right now?
Okay, well, I think, the main challenge that everyone would recognize at the moment in the for-purpose sector is the same one it's always been, which is money, resources, time, spreading ourselves too thin. That's a particular challenge here in New Zealand at the moment, with successive cuts that we've seen in the sector, and also in those that support our sector. So that's hard. That's really, really hard. And then you sort of couple that with a growing demand for services. And I don't think that's unique to victim support. I think that's something that lots of people are experiencing. That's really forced us to be even more focused about where we can have the most impact. So, we've done a big piece of work on looking at our core purpose. We've transitioned out of some work that we weren't necessarily the best people to do. And now that's left us in a really interesting place. So right now, our big focus is making sure that all victims of crime in this country are, first of all, offered support, and that we're in a position then to help them. And then if you look at the diverse range of people that are victims of crime, it can affect everyone from different ethnic groups, across our rainbow communities, our disability communities, our rural communities, our city-based communities, young and old. How do we design a service that is safe and empowering and inclusive for everyone to use as well? So that's our big, big challenge at the moment. First of all, let's make sure through our relationship with the police, everyone gets offered that victim support. And when they get offered that, we have a range of different ways to offer support, both in person and remotely or through technology, that people feel, yep, there's something there for me and I want to engage in that. And that is probably the big challenge for us over the next few years. And the really tough part of that, I suppose, is highlighting quite a big gap in funding as well between what we're funded for now and the true demand for our services out there. Now, I think that's the same as every other for purpose out there. The way that we're tackling that is probably not unique at all, is we are trying to think of the current messages of the day, which is about social return on investment, economic return as well, have our numbers, have our data, have all of our facts, have our stories, and be really, really focused on getting politicians out onto our front line to see it for themselves. We've done that a lot in the last year or so, and just keep going, even when there is big criticism, because the amazing thing about our sector, as friendly and as supportive and as collaborative as it is when you put your head up and say that there's something needs to change, you're inviting comment and criticism as well. So right now, that's our big focus. We've got great consistency of practice. We've got amazing levels of support happening out there. Let's make sure that everyone can access that wherever they are, whatever their background, and whatever their previous experience with organizations like us or the state sector in the past. So that keeps us very, very motivated. You can probably hear that gets me fired up. Well, that's our big push.
I love the positive outlook that you're looking at this from. In terms of what someone who is struggling with the economic conditions at the moment can do, is there anything that you would give advice on?
Yeah, I think as leaders in this sector, we're all wrestling with that at the moment. The difficult thing is that, over successive years, we've looked at the easy things. We've looked at perhaps the services or the contracts or the or the teams or the added value things that aren't adding as much impact. And those have been trimmed over the years. Contracts have been looked at, outcomes have been looked at. So I think taking again, a more rigorous look at that has been very important for us. And then I think it really comes back, given that there's very little we can do about those conditions. Those conditions hopefully will improve, but right now we're in the middle of them. And we're not far off the back of the COVID times either. So it's this kind of layers of things on us as leaders and as teams. I think it comes back, Azura, to the wellbeing piece that we've spoken about as well, is almost counterintuitively when things are really difficult and really demanding on your time, we have to put even more time into looking after ourselves and our well-being, because that means that we have even better energy and better mindsets to grab those opportunities when they come. So, yeah, I think it's that thing about, when things are really hard, we look after ourselves even better. That some of those things are free. Some of the well-being practices about making sure we get outside for our one-to-ones, that's free of charge, but that will have an effect on us as well. I think the other thing that I would really encourage, I found a lot of benefit in this, is it's a very lonely position, big leaders in these sectors, really encourage others to connect as well. I'm very fortunate to be on a few networks of different CEOs, different leaders. I think as tough as times can be, it's really encouraging to, and maybe quite reassuring when you know that other people have got those same challenges as well. And we find that in our work here, when we connect victims of crime up with other victims, as tough as that situation is, it's reassuring to speak to someone who's been through the same thing. So I think right now, the power of connection in this community of nonprofits, of for-purpose organizations, is really, really important. And to get a consistent message to government about the importance of our work as well.
I love that. Connection, community, and clarity, the three combined together definitely creates a powerful network around us. In terms of the practices that you've just covered today, if there was one poster that you were going to put up in your staff room, what would it say?
Well, you just kind of said it. I like the connection, community, and clarity. I think that's fantastic. Well, I've never had it replayed to me like that. So thank you. I'm writing that down. It would be that I've said it a few times, but the power of purpose, which is such a cliche given what we're talking about throughout this whole conversation, but it's really easy for an organization like ours, and so many good ones out there, to become all things to all people, because you don't want to say no, right? We have good, strong, good-hearted people in our organizations, and we see the needs in our community. So I think that the power of purpose is quite amazing. And the more we got focused on our core purpose here, and I want to acknowledge all of the amazing team that worked on that here, the better clarity that gave us in order to say no to some things, in order to say yes to the right things, to look after ourselves in a different way, and to explain to our clients, victims, the beneficiaries, exactly why we're here and we can best help you. So, I think what I've learned from my experience so far here at Victim Support, and I've got a lot more I want to achieve here in the future, is the importance of not taking that purpose for granted. We know we're here for victims of crime, but let's look back at that deeper. What exactly do we do? And how can we have the most impact? And I think when resources are scarce, as they are at the moment, really getting laser focused on purpose, the power of purpose. But connection, community, and clarity is pretty cool as well.
Thank you.
I love that. Thank you, James. I think you've shared so many nuggets today, not only on your own personal journey, but also for the community as a whole to take away. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing.
Zora, thank you so much for the great conversation. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and got as much out of it as I did. As always, if this episode speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. I appreciate you, and until next time, keep caring beyond profits.